here. Without taking much time, my name is William Baloyi. I will then invite a minister in the presidency to lead us in this post-cabinet briefing. Thank you.
The microphones are meaning there's no space. We may have to expand the podium. Good morning, colleagues. This is the cabinet statement of the cabinet meetings that took place on the 25th of March, 2026, and it concluded its business on the 1st of April, 2026. Is the reason we didn't brief on the 26th of March, because cabinet had not concluded its business. So we are briefing today on the economy. The SARS collecting a record 2 trillion rands in net revenue. Cabinet applauded SARS under Commissioner Edward Kisvet for collecting just over 2 trillion rands in net revenue, a record milestone which was achieved in the fastest period since the 1 trillion net revenue collection milestone. The improved tax collection boasts fiscal capacity and stability by reducing government's reliance on debt and creating more fiscal space to fund the budget. The country is reaping the benefits of improvements in tax compliance and SARS administrative efficiencies, which are a result of action, is also a demonstration of economic growth, in this case anchored by economic performance of the mining sector, which remains a backbone of South Africa's economy. The milestone represents significant economic growth when compared to the mere 114 billion rands revenue collection in 1994-1995 and the period it took SARS to reach the 1 trillion net collection in 2018, and only 8 years to achieve the 2 trillion net revenue collection. On the 6th South African Investment Conference, which confirms the country as a preferred investment destination, the country hosted a remarkably successful 6th South African Investment Conference on the 31st of March 2026 in Johannesburg, with over 1,000 delegates from 50 countries that took part in the summit. The 6th South African Investment Conference marks the second cycle of investment drive in which the government is pursuing a 2 trillion worth of investment target over the next 5 years. I must emphasize the President has indicated he has revised the target to 3 trillion rand because we almost hit 1 trillion rand on day one. The 898 billion worth of investment pledges, comprising 81 projects across all 9 provinces, was a decisive vote of confidence on South Africa as an investment destination. The investment commitments are expected to create over 230,000 jobs, permanent jobs, supporting government's commitment to inclusive growth and job creation. Since its inception in 2018, the South African Investment Conference has successfully mobilized 1.56 trillion rands in investment commitments in the first cycle, surpassing the President's original target of 628 billion. I think this year we're going to surpass this cycle we're going to surpass it by more than 1 trillion rands. From the 1.5 trillion rands investment commitments, 137 projects totaling 400 billion have been completed, while 84 projects valued at 417 billion are currently under construction. And the Minister of DTIC provided the in-depth briefing during the investment conference, and we'll check if interest, if we should get him to brief again around the benefits and the targets and the progress. On the continuous rising GDP that signals a steady growing economy, Cabinet welcomed the 5 consecutive quarters of uninterrupted economic growth, which resulted in an annual GDP increase of 1.1% for 2025 as released by Stats SA. This growth was also supported by a 0.4% GDP increase in the final quarter of 2025. The most robust economic performance since 2022 was driven primarily by key service sectors of finance, real estate and business services, trade, catering and accommodation, and personal services, which were further supported by positive contributions from agriculture and general government services. On the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development Credit Facility to boost critical infrastructure development, Cabinet welcomed the establishment of a credit guarantee vehicle by the International Bank for the Reconstruction and Development to the value of 350 million US dollars, which is approximately 5.6 billion rands. The credit guarantee vehicle will initially focus on expanding the country's electricity infrastructure and will in future be broadened to include infrastructure projects in water, freight, logistics, education, and health. On the LIV Golf event, the first in African soil, Cabinet is pleased that South Africa has once again demonstrated its capabilities as a premier event destination by successfully hosting the LIV Golf, the first ever on African soil in Johannesburg, that featured top international players alongside outstanding South African players. Over 100,000 people attended this prestigious event, which generated substantial economic and socio-economic benefits, including increased tourism. For instance, some of the visitors who attended the event have extended their stay to explore the country's diverse tourism offerings, including safari destinations, coastal regions, wine-producing areas, and the cities. More LIV Golf events are set for 2027 and 2028, with a potential continuation in 2029 and 2030. Tickets for the 2027 SA LIV Golf have opened for sale. Please hurry, they sell out quickly. They're like fat cakes. Mitigating the impact of the US-Israel-Iran war to South Africans, Cabinet joined President Cyril Ramaphosa in calling for the immediate ceasefire in the US, Israel, and Iran war that is negatively affecting the Middle East region and the world. Cabinet is kept abreast on the security of domestic fuel supply, which is affected by the ongoing war, and it was assured that South Africa's fuel system remains supply adequate in the immediate period. Cabinet was informed that South Africa only relies on the Middle East supply for refined products. The President has established a ministerial task team comprising of ministers of mineral and petroleum resources, who are the chairperson, finance, transport, trade, industry and competition, international relations and cooperation, agriculture, electricity and energy, forestry, fisheries and environment, and the presidency, to coordinate government's response in a holistic manner to mitigate the impact on the cost of living, fuel, and food security. As an immediate intervention, the task team recommended the reduction in the fuel levy for the immediate period to alleviate the impact on the fuel price increases that took effect on Wednesday, 1st of April. And people have also experienced a reduction of what was projected as the fuel levy, as the fuel price increase. We would like to assure South Africans that fuel supplies in the country remain stable, and the current dry fuel stations are a result of logistics constraints due to panic buying and fuel hoarding. South Africans are discouraged from panic buying and fuel hoarding. We've got the adequate supplies, and we've got plans that will make sure South Africa remains fuel supply adequate. Postbank licensing that ensures affordable financial services are accessible to financially excluded communities. Cabinet welcomes the formal licensing of the Postbank as a financial service provider by the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, which bolsters ongoing work to position Postbank into a sustainable state-owned bank. With this license, Postbank will be able to broaden its range of financial services to advance financial inclusion and offer affordable financial services for financially excluded communities. Cabinet commended the progress made in strengthening Postbank's capabilities as a state-owned retail banking institution. On the recovery operations at the Ikapa Minerals Mine, Cabinet received an update on the recovery operation to retrieve the bodies of the 5 miners who have been trapped underground since the mud rush at the Ikapa Minerals Mine in Kimberley. All 5 bodies have been brought to the surface, and Cabinet extends its deepest condolences to the families, colleagues, and loved ones of the deceased. The Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources has commenced with a full-scale investigation into the incident in order to bring those responsible for negligence, if any, to book. On public service improvements, metro trading services reform to improve essential services in the 8 metros. Cabinet welcomes the launch of the Metro Trading Services Reform, a flagship initiative of Operation Vulindlela, designed to help the country's 8 metropolitan municipalities to restore and strengthen the delivery of electricity, water and wastewater and solid waste services. As part of the program, the National Treasury will allocate 54 billion in performance-based incentives over the next 6 years, providing dedicated funding to metropolitan municipalities that demonstrate measurable improvements in the delivery of essential services. To qualify for the incentives, metros must meet the performance targets set out in the Performance Improvement Action Plan in key trading services of water, electricity, and solid waste services. On the Public Financial Management Act audit outcomes of 2024 to 25, Cabinet deliberated on the 2024-25 PFMA audit outcomes, the General Report for National, Provincial Departments, Public Entities and Legislatures by the Auditor General of South Africa. The report shows slight improvement in unqualified audit opinions with no findings, popularly known as clean audits, which increased from 142 in 2023-24 to 151 in 24-25, while irregular and wasteful expenditure declined compared to the previous year, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure decreased significantly from 3.54 billion rands in 23-24 to 1.4 billion rands in 24-25. If it's not enough, we are looking forward and working towards the complete eradication of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Cabinet is concerned about a number of entities and departments that have stagnated on the unqualified audit with findings category and no relative implementation of action plans to correct the findings. For example, since 2023-24 report, only 38 material irregularities were resolved and only 1.38 billion in financial losses was prevented or recovered. Cabinet will actively implement and support measures by the Auditor General to bring accountability by overseeing the implementation of the robust internal controls, action plans, and preventative measures that are key to good governance and service improvement. On the fight against crime, cheers. The deployment of the South African National Defence Force to support SAPS in the fight against crime. Cabinet welcomed the deployment of over 2,200 members of the South African National Defence Force who will serve to support SAPS in the fight against illegal mining and gangsterism in the Eastern Cape, Free State, Gauteng, Northwest, and Western Cape. The SNDF will act as a force multiplier and operate with clear rules of engagement. The rollout of the South African National Defence Force deployment is near completion. Our heritage and custom must be respected by all, in particular our visitors. Cabinet expressed disgust of the so-called coronation of the Nigerian national as an alleged chief in Kukompo City in the Eastern Cape and indicated that it is a mere kindergarten gimmick and has no legal effect. Cabinet confirmed that the establishment, recognition, and functioning of any traditional leadership structure are strictly governed by the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act, which provides clear and non-negotiable procedures for legitimacy and recognition. Cabinet noted the apology from the Nigerian High Commission on this matter and directed DERCO to continue engaging with the High Commission on the unacceptable conduct of Nigerians in South Africa that is unbecoming of visitors. And we must remind them they are visitors in this country. It is deeply concerning that legitimate grievances over this matter have resulted in the acts of violence and criminality. Cabinet reminds South Africans that the right to protest comes with responsibility. It must be exercised peacefully and within the confines of the law. On advancing human rights and restoring the dignity through land restitution, as part of restoring human dignity, President Cyril Ramaphosa returned 17,000 hectares of land, benefiting approximately 2,000 beneficiaries to the St. Paul, Ngunjini, Nzimankulu, Vierkant communities and the Lawrence family in KwaZulu-Natal. The Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, returned over 627 hectares of land and title deeds to the Shulk Mrenga Communal Property Association benefiting 18 households and 86 beneficiaries in the Governbeki local municipalities in Mpumalanga, representing the Mtsweni family. As of March 2025, a total of 83,205 land claims have been settled, resulting in the restoration of 3.5 million hectares of land to dispossessed communities and individuals since 1995. Government has invested 58 billion rands in land purchases, grants and financial compensation, supporting 976 beneficiaries nationwide. Furthermore, a total of 5.3 million hectares have been redistributed since 1995, and the government has strengthened post-settlement support, improved farm viability, and expanded market access. On the dignity and rights of Khoisans being reaffirmed, Cabinet welcomed the reburial of the human remains of 63 Khoisan ancestral remains at the Kindle Monument in Steenkop in the Northern Cape Province. These remains are a small group of thousands of illegally removed remains of indigenous people during the late 19th century and early 20th century to museums in Europe and across the world. The reburial is part of the restoration of the rights and human dignity of the Khoi and San people, and a reminder of the indignity of the system of colonialization and apartheid that treated Africans as less human and creatures of ridicule and entertainment. The reburials are a commitment of governments to honor those who sacrificed their lives in the resistance struggle against colonialism and the fight for freedom. The reburials coincide with another milestone of the inclusion of the Khoi and San traditional names in the system of the Department of Home Affairs, which is an important step to restoring human dignity. For the first time in South Africa's history, birth certificates, smart IDs, and passports can now formally recognize and record Khoisan traditional names following the upgrading of IT systems at the Department of Home Affairs. On cabinet decisions, the revised white paper on citizenship, migration, immigration, and refugee protection. Cabinet approved the revised white paper on citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection for implementation. The policy introduces a fundamental overhaul of South Africa's immigration and citizenship framework. Following initial cabinet approval in April 2024, the Department of Home Affairs published a draft revised white paper on 12 December 2025 to incorporate the priorities of the Government of National Unity. The white paper seeks to consolidate South African Citizenships Act, Immigration Act, and Refugees Act into a single piece of legislation to remove existing legal contradictions. Key enhancements include the integration of recommendation of the Operation Vulindlela report on visa policy reforms, additional clarity and detail to strengthen implementation of immigration and citizenship policies, and greater focus on digital transformation. The revised white paper aims to ensure a coherent, modernized approach to citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. It supports national development and national security objectives, including the first safe country principle, which encourages refugees to seek protection in the first country they reach that is considered safe. And South Africa, we are not the first country for many countries. The white paper makes provision for relevant government departments to designate trade, occupation, and professions reserved solely for South Africans to give effect to Section 22 of the Constitution. The designation by the relevant department must also give due consideration to the right of asylum seekers to seek employment in order to earn a living to maintain one's dignity. You'll recall that South Africa does not provide refugee camps. So for refugees and asylum seekers, they are allowed, therefore, to seek employment and to conduct business, but they must have the relevant papers. The research report on the impact of climate change on persons with disability. Cabinet approved the research report on the impact of climate change on persons with disabilities for publication. The aim of the report is to ensure that all climate action, mitigation, and adaptation strategies are inclusive of persons with disabilities. The study identifies significant gaps in measures to protect persons with disabilities during disaster events. Key recommendations include the mainstreaming of climate change and disaster management responses, ensuring that early warning mechanisms are accessible to all persons with disabilities, providing accessible and appropriate disaster-responsive communication, prioritizing women and girls with disabilities, as well as older persons with disabilities in climate change planning, increasing the participation of persons with disabilities in climate change policy development and implementation processes, and strengthening the inclusion of persons with disabilities in local level climate change policy formulation and implementation. The report on the invocation of the Nations of Water Local Municipality, Cabinet confirmed the appointment of a Cabinet representative and the approved terms of reference for the national intervention. Progress in the intervention includes: 1, the regularization of the appointments of the mayor, the speaker, and the regularization of Section 79 and Section 80 committees that has been finalized, while legal assessment is being conducted on the legality of the appointment of the municipal manager. The approval of the financial recovery plan by the Minister of Finance, which is now being processed to council. In addition, to ensure continuity in the provision of basic services, a water and sanitation service level agreement has been concluded with Ngakamudiri Mulema District Municipality, and the associated business plan has been finalized. As part of the disaster management intervention, following disasters that were experienced between November 2024 and February 2025, which were not declared because of the dysfunctionality in the municipality, 95 of the planned 239 traditional housing units have been constructed. The National Cocta has finalized a review, it's not the traditional, it's temporary housing units that have been constructed. We are working to ensure that instead of temporary housing units, we build resilient structures that can become permanent housing units using the recent building technologies. National Cocta has finalized a review of the municipality's ICT infrastructure to support the recovery of infrastructure and service delivery. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment has appointed a service provider to assist with the development of an integrated waste management plan, while the Provincial Department of Public Works has availed 2 trucks to support the removal of waste at identified illegal dumping sites. Engagements between the municipality and ESCOM are at an advanced stage to conclude an agreement aimed at addressing electricity supply challenges. The JCPS cluster departments continue to provide support through intelligence, crime prevention, prosecution, and security management interventions. The Ministers of Finance and Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs continue to provide strategic and operational intergovernmental support to the intervention. On the draft National Airports Development Plan, Cabinet approved the publication of the draft National Airports Development Plan for public comment. The National Airports Development Plan is a planning framework developed by the Department of Transport to guide the coordinated development, expansion, and long-term sustainability of South Africa's airport network. It provides a strategic, system-wide approach to airport infrastructure planning, ensuring alignment with national transport, economic, and spatial development priorities. The draft National Rail Master Plan, the Cabinet approved the publication of the draft National Rail Master Plan for public comments. The National Rail Master Plan is a long-term strategic plan being developed to guide the revitalization, expansion, and modernization of South Africa's rail system. The master plan translates the national rail policy approved by Cabinet in 2022 into a practical, phased investment and implementation plan for freight and passenger rail over the coming decades. It aims to create an affordable, competitive system by integrating passenger, freight, and high-speed rail while encouraging private sector participation. South Africa's rail system has experienced years of underinvestment, declining performance, theft, vandalism, and operational inefficiencies, resulting in congestion on roads, higher logistics costs, and reduced competitiveness of the economy. The National Road Master Plan responds to these challenges by positioning rail as the backbone of the national transport system, supporting economic growth, job creation, and climate goals. The Township and Rural Economic Development and Revitalization Policy, Cabinet approved the publication of Draft Township and Rural Economic Development and Revitalization Plan policy, for public comment. The policy is designed to transform local economies from consumption-driven areas into productive, vibrant hubs for integrating them into the mainstream economy. It aims to foster sustainable entrepreneurship, create employment, and reduce poverty through targeted and coordinated support. The draft South African Artificial Intelligence Policy Cabinet approved for publication the draft South African AI policy for public comment. The aim of the policy is to ensure that both the benefits and risks brought by AI are evenly distributed across society and generation. The AI policy aims to strengthen government's ability to regulate and adopt AI responsibly while encouraging local innovation, supporting job creation, and improving access to AI skills. The National Entrepreneurship Strategy and Implementation Plan. Cabinet approved the National Entrepreneurship Strategy and its implementation plan. The strategy aims to strengthen micro, small, and medium enterprises and address youth unemployment. It is anchored on 5 pillars: 1, enhancing entrepreneurship, education, and skills development; 2, facilitating technology exchange and innovation; 3, improving access to finance and markets; 4, regulatory improvement; and 5, promoting awareness and networking. Incubation and Business Development Services Policy Framework. Cabinet approved the Incubation and Business Development Services Policy Framework for implementation. The policy framework provides regulatory reform for the small enterprise ecosystem by clarifying the roles of various stakeholders and promoting coordinated and integrated support. The Incubation and Business Development Services Framework is a key component of the National Integrated Small Enterprise Development Master Plan, which serves as the guiding framework for all role players involved in accelerating the growth of micro, small, medium enterprises through measurable programs, products, and services. You can see we were in the cabinet meeting for the Minister of Small Business Development. On the bills, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from and Unlawful Occupation of Land Amendment Bill. Cabinet approved the publication of the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from and Unlawful Occupation of Land Amendment Bill for public comments. The bill aims to amend the 1998 PI Act to combat illegal land invasions, protect property owners, and curb the activities of organized land syndicates. Key proposals include criminalizing the incitement of land invasions, extending criteria considered by courts when issuing orders, and strengthening regulations regarding alternative accommodation. The amendments further seek to address ambiguities in the current Act, which create uncertainty regarding the definitions and requirements that must be met for a lawful eviction, notwithstanding the intentions or circumstances of persons engaged in unlawful occupation. The National Economic Development and Labour Council Bill, commonly known as the NEDLEC Bill. Cabinet approved the submission of the NEDLEC Bill to Parliament for further processing. The draft bill will repeal the NEDLEC Act 35 of 1994 and proposes alignment of NEDLEC's institutional arrangements to changes in the constitutional legal order that have occurred since 1994. The draft bill also provides for the minister to make regulations on the admission and membership thresholds through a process that includes consultation and public submissions, making the system more transparent. The General Laws Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Terrorism Finance Amendment Bill 2026. Cabinet approved the introduction of the bill to Parliament. The 2026 draft bill builds on earlier versions of the General Laws Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Terrorism Financing Amendment Bills. And since then, the National Treasury has expanded the proposals to include additional measures relating to the strengthening of the legal framework to combat money laundering and terrorism financing. The bill amends the current acts, namely the Financial Intelligence Center Act of 2001, the Non-Profit Organization Act of 1997, the Trust Property Control Act of 1998, the Companies Act of 2008, and the Financial Sector Regulation Act of 2017. These amendments are intended to strengthen South Africa's anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financing systems so that the country can protect itself from the terrorist acts and contribute to the fight against terrorism globally. And it will also be in line with our commitments to the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, and who are going to conduct mutual evaluation that will begin mid-2026 and will conclude in October. The Protected Disclosures Bill 2026, Cabinet approved the publication of the draft Protected Disclosures Bill, commonly known as the Whistleblowers Protection Bill, for public comments. The bill is part of the legislative reforms aimed at strengthening the protection of whistleblowers through amendments to the existing Protected Disclosures Act of 26 of 2000. It also responds to the recommendations from the State Capture Commission report, which called for better protection of policymakers and whistleblowers. The bill contains proposals to criminalize retaliation and provide psychosocial, legal, and financial support to whistleblowers. The bill will broaden the definition of a whistleblower to include contractors, consultants, and members of the public, and it will establish clear procedures for confidential disclosures. Minister Kubayi will brief next week on the details of the bill. The Electronic Communications Amendment Act Bill of 2026, Cabinet approved the submission of the ECA bill to Parliament. The aim of the bill is to amend the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. The purpose of the proposed amendments is to increase the level of competition in the telecommunications sector and drive down prices. The amendments to the Electronic Communications Act are also intended to create an enabling environment for investment with a key focus on reducing regulatory barriers to entry, to improve competition, and also allow the Independent Communications Authority, commonly known as ICASA, flexibility to regulate the sector. Conduct of Financial Institutions Bill, Cabinet approved the submission of, which is commonly known as the Coffee Bill. Cabinet approved the submission of the Coffee Bill of 2025 to Parliament. The purpose of the bill is to create a single, holistic framework for regulating the market conduct of all financial institutions. This is part of the government's broader goal to reform the financial regulation towards the Twin Peaks model. The Twin Peaks model is a regulatory system that splits financial supervision into two distinct authorities: the Prudential Authority for Safety and Soundness, and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority for Market Conduct and Consumer Protection. The system creates a safer sector that operates in the interests of all consumers. The bill will ensure fair customer treatment, enhance transformation, and promote stability. It further supports the transformation of the financial sector and requires financial institutions to have policies in place to comply with the Financial Sector Code. Also, the bill supports market development and competition by enabling a differentiated approach to licensing to foster entry of new players, such as financial technology-driven players. On appointments, all appointments are subject to verifications of qualifications and relevant security clearances. Cabinet appointed Mr. Bereng Bim Timkulu as Secretary of Defense and also appointed Ms. Nomfundo Clementine Shabalala as the Director General at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. This is an extension of contract for the DG of DFFE. Ms. Kolile Advisor Brukwe as Deputy Director General, Corporate Support Services at the Department of Social Development. Mr. Sbusiso Atwell Makanya as the Chief Executive Officer of Pongola Mzimkulu Catchment Management Agency. Ms. Lucia Lungelwa Skasana as Regional Executive Manager, Western Cape Region in the South African Social Security Agency. Appointment of Directors on the Board of Airports Company of South Africa, Mr. Ivan Penyane as the Chairperson, Ms. Eunice Toliswa Daku as the Deputy Chairperson, Ms. Kitumesi Stella Mahlangu, Mr. Surrender Suklal, Mr. Kate Parker, Ms. Yolanda Exner, Ms. Patrick Roy Mnisi, and Mr. Tinius Chamberlain. Members of the Ismangaliso Wetland Park Authority, Ms. Memory Tulile Sobiso as the Chairperson and is a reappointment. Mr. Bongani Mzwake Mhlongo is a reappointment. Ms. Nombuso Mlambo, reappointment. Mr. Sfiso Mdluli, Dr. Kalin Padeachi, Ms. Jecolette Adam, Ms. Hazel Tulisile Tulu, Ms. Zamkile Corinne Zama, and Mr. Boy Daniel Ngobeni is a reappointment. I'll correct the appointments for the Ismangaliso Wetland Park Authority. I'll verify with my notes. Upcoming events. We are in the Freedom Month, which is a very important milestone for the country. And it marks 32 years since the historic transition from the oppressive apartheid regime to a sovereign democratic state. This year's commemoration carries special significance as the country also celebrates 30 years anniversary of the Constitution, 50 years anniversary of the youth uprisings, 60 years anniversary since the District 6 forced removals, and 70 years since the 1956 Women's March to the Union Buildings. And against this historic milestone, the Freedom Month provides an opportunity for citizens to advance the rights and responsibility enshrined in our Constitution by fostering greater social cohesion and ongoing transformation in our nation. And it's a commitment that all South Africans must remember. This freedom was not free. Play your part and register to vote. Another important reminder of the value of our Constitution. The Independent Electoral Commission has designated Saturday 20th and Sunday 21st June 2026 as the official voter registration weekend. Cabinet is urging South Africans who are eligible to vote to register to vote in the forthcoming local government elections. You can register even outside the voter registration weekend at your nearest municipality or your IEC. You can also register online on the register2vote.elections.org.za. You are eligible to vote if you are a South African citizen from the age of 18 and in possession of a ID book and smart ID card or temporary identification certificate. Citizens are advised to remain vigilant and avoid clicking on suspicious links or visit fake websites that impersonate the domain of the Independent Electoral Commission. On condolences, Cabinet expressed condolences to the family and friends of the anti-apartheid activist and former Premier of Free State and former Minister of Defense, Mr. Musiwali Kota, who dedicated his life to the struggle for non-racialism, non-sexism, and a democratic South Africa. Family and friends of Mr. Nicholas Khoisan, a renowned human rights lawyer who served as the chief legal advisor to the President Nelson Mandela and later as the United Nations Secretary General, Special Representative in various envoys. He was working with us on the South Sudan peace mechanism as part of the UN representative. The veteran journalist, esteemed author, and dedicated struggle stalwart, Mr. Terry Bell, who played a principled and effective role in the fight against apartheid, using both his voice and his writing to expose inequality and advance the cause of democratic change in South Africa. On congratulations, Cabinet extended its hearty congratulations, and you'll understand why, and well wishes to Professor Nyawereni Chiflaro and his medical team for successfully separating conjoined twins in a groundbreaking operation at the Mankweng Hospital in the province of Limpopo, which is a rural province, but it's also at a public hospital. This highly specialized procedure reaffirms the potential of South African hospitals, including those in rural areas, to perform complex medical procedures as the country prepares to roll out the national health insurance. But this is also for Limpopo a reaffirmation of the initiative that was started by then MEC, now Premier Dr. Popira Mastuba of Rural Health Matters. And that initiative extended tertiary specialist health services to the people of Limpopo at public hospitals, and also attracted critical and specialized medical skills to the rural province. We also extend our hearty congratulations to Dr. Kiamkhetswi Ramunaheng, the head of medical physics and radiobiology at the Nuclear Medical Research Infrastructure, commonly known as NUMERI, on receiving the prestigious Sol Heads Award at the 8th Therapeutics World Congress for contributions to therapeutics, an emerging field that combines diagnostic imaging, and targeted radionuclide therapy to improve cancer treatment outcomes. With this award, it shows that South Africa is among the leading countries in advanced medical treatment of complicated diseases that now use the benefits of advanced and robotic technology in the country or in the world. To Professor Prinola Govender from the University of Johannesburg, who has been awarded a prestigious UNESCO Chair, Cultural Inclusivity and Equity in Digital Media in Africa 2026-2030, after a very competitive global process of 135 applications submitted to UNESCO headquarters in Paris, France. And if I boast, you'll say it's because University of Johannesburg is my alma mater, so I'm keeping quiet. To Kutlwano Peta, a postgraduate diploma in accounting science student who was selected in 2025 as one of only 16 participants out of more than 1,800 applicants worldwide for the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants Global Talent Program in Singapore. Kutlwano, who will soon be joining the Auditor General of South Africa's office, was the sole participant representing Africa. A fitting tribute. No DNA, just RSA, guys. Sure. When will you learn? I've been teaching. South African long-distance runner Adrian Walls, who claimed victory in the New York City Half Marathon. Major General Carl Moshe, now it's Lieutenant General, sorry. Lieutenant General Carl Moshe, who has been appointed to take over the command of the South African Air Force with effect from yesterday, 1st of April 2026. He succeeds the outgone Chief of Air Force, Lieutenant General Wiseman Simo Mbambo, whose tenure has been defined by steadfast leadership and service to the nation. We say farewell to General Mbambo and welcome to General Moshe. Ms. Litnia Johnson for being appointed the CEO of the First National Bank after 25 years with the institution, and she will also lead the bank's new retail and business unit. Ms. Valdine Reddy for being appointed the CEO of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and the first woman of color to hold such a position. The Springbok Sevens, our beloved Blitz Boke, for being crowned the 2025-26 World Sevens Series champions and for winning the New York Sevens title. The Zotinina. Greater Zanin Municipality in Mupani, Limpopo, for being named the cleanest municipality in South Africa at the National Waste Management Awards hosted by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. To the Cape Town International Airport for being recognized as the best airport in Africa for the 11th consecutive year at the 2026 Sidetracks World Airports Award in London, United Kingdom, and the OR Tambo International Airport was ranked second best there, while King Shaka International Airport in Durban was placed the fourth and also featured among the top regional airports in Africa. We clean the awards on the infrastructures, please. You know, it's just us, and we say there's no progress in South Africa. There is progress in South Africa. Only good things are happening in South Africa. We also extend our congratulations to us, South Africa, on our appointment to the Communications Working Group for the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women convened under the United Nations. This appointment affirms South Africa's leadership in advancing strategic communication for gender equality and women's empowerment. And it's a fitting tribute to this country as we mark 70th since the 1956 Women's March to the Union Buildings as a tribute to the heroines that walked before us and laid the path for the struggle for gender inclusivity and women empowerment in this country. To the music legend, Dr. Abdul Ibrahim, on his retirement at a mighty age of 91, a hero of the struggle for liberation who used his music to tell the story of then racist South Africa. South Africans owe you a debt of gratitude. As you retire well, but may you live longer so that you continue to give us your guidance. Our last message is a message about the behavior during the Easter weekend. Cabinet wishes all the South Africans a safe and joyous Easter long weekend. This is a time when many South Africans are traveling around the country to visit family, friends, or for religious purposes. This often comes at an increased traffic volumes on our routes. Cabinet calls on everyone to act responsibly when driving, ensure that your vehicle is roadworthy before driving, and everyone in the car, including children, must fasten their seatbelts. We also welcome visitors to our country and reassure South Africans and visitors alike that fighting crime remains one of the priorities of South Africa's government, and therefore the deployment of law enforcement during this heightened period of Easter is at its highest. And we are making steady progress in the fight against crime. Our country remains committed and also is continuously registering declines year on year, quarter on quarter on the crime statistics that are recorded by the police. And we assure everyone in our show that they will be safe, but they must take precaution, they must not act recklessly. Popular tourist attractions are afforded additional security. With the Easter weekend approaching, the Border Management Authority is ready to ensure efficient, secure, and seamless movement of people and goods across South Africa's 71 ports of entry during this period. And those who want to enter illegally, be warned. BMA is seriously advanced, and our borders are effectively being managed and monitored by our National Defence Force. Due to the foot and mouth disease situation in the country, Cabinet is appealing for responsible animal movement to prevent the further spread of the foot and mouth disease in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the comprehensive statement. And indeed, you indicated that it covers meetings that took place following each other. Let me start by inviting questions in the House, and then we will go to the online questions. May I also indicate that the statement will be shared very soon. I know you have been sending messages looking for it. We'll share it very soon. Let me start in the House by way of hands, and the drill is the same. I will note your hand, I will note the second hand, then I recognize them in that order.
All right, thank you. Muluku Mloto here from ENC. I have got a couple of questions. I want to start on the amendments in regard to the communications legislation, Minister. Is this as a result of the pressure perhaps exerted by companies such as Starlink of Elon Musk, who has been vehemently refusing to hand over 30% of his company to a BEE company here? But also, is this a tacit admission that those who have been criticizing the implementation of BEE, particularly handing over certain percentage to black companies, were perhaps correct in a way that compels South Africa to reconsider the implementation of BEE? I then want to ask about the 2 trillion rand target or collection that was made by SARS. How do you intend to sustain this going forward, especially if you look at the fact that SARS itself has admitted that there's about 523 billion rand undisputed that's up for collection, but somehow it lacks the capacity to collect that money. Maybe let me conclude. Yeah, second to that, with the National Commissioner of SARS retiring, was his possible replacement up for discussion in your meeting? And finally, was there any discussion on the, okay, maybe let me leave that one. I want to understand, in regard to the task team that has been set up to look at how to mitigate the pressure that South Africans may endure, we acknowledge and appreciate the cut of 3 rand on the fuel levy, but what other options are on the table for that trust team? Because we have heard that the 3 rand is just for the month of April. Going forward, what other options are there? Or my last question is on whether there was a discussion on the future of the National Police Commissioner, General Van Masemela. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moloto.
Good morning, Raymond from Netwerk Vriendwana. Just want to know if Cabinet discussed the possibility that it seems like the US is trying to isolate South Africa from international affairs, as it seems that the US exerting pressure on France to not invite South Africa to the G7, whereas they move the US as more closer relations now with Kenya. And then my second question is, I think it was last month that the Iranian ambassador said South Africa, they will guarantee safe passage for South Africa through the Strait of Hormuz. Did the Cabinet discuss the possibility to perhaps take up that offer so that South Africa can get fuel from the Middle East? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I was a little bit obscured. There is a very hand behind here.
Yes, it's me probably. It's Zianda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa. Just to follow on some of my colleagues' questions in relation to the task team that's been set up to deal with the issue of fuel in light of the Israel-Iran-US conflict. Are there any options, as we've acknowledged, for the petrol, but for paraffin, in particular for those households that largely rely on paraffin, and we're also going into the winter season? What are the options there? Did Cabinet, discuss that? And Minister, you've also spoken about how in the short term or in the immediate term, the supply issues, if the fuel will remain stable. What period are we talking about here? Is it a month? Is it 2 months, 3 months? Because we're just not sure how long this conflict will be going on for. And on the issue of related to the security cluster, and in relation in particular to the National Police Commissioner, will he still be the one overseeing that special investigations task team that is working parallel and in tandem with the Madlanga Commission in light of the pending charges against him? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. I invite Minister to respond.
Thank you. So we come here and we announce the amendment of the ECA, which was last adopted in 2005. And we want to divert to something else. So the ECA, as it stands, it's outdated. And it's outdated, why? Because it has been overtaken by events, the development in the technology space, including the advent of AI and all the other things, requires a different regulatory framework. And the Department of Communication is amending one particular chapter, because you need to do them chapter by chapter. If you do a wholesale amendment of the ECA, you are going to then have problems, because some of the amendments will be hotly debated or contested, including to courts. The ECA amendment is meant to improve the South African's legislative framework and regulatory framework for the sector, in line with the progress that have been registered in the sector, of ICT. In fact, we no longer talk about ICT, we talk about digital transformation. So the regulatory environment must come alive to those requirements. I must just make a comment on the reference. BEE in South Africa is non-negotiable. We will work to improve its efficiency and its application. But the transformation and empowerment of Black South Africans to achieve economic inclusivity is a non-negotiable. So there is no department in this country that will undermine any BEE provisions or undermine any transformation goals. There will not be any other, there will not be accommodations of individual businesses at the expense of the interests of South Africa. But equally, there is a need to bring uniformity on the applications of the rules in the country for all investors and players, no specific one. And I don't want to speak about a particular company, but you know that we hold no specific brief as a country and government for that South African. We must remind you he is a South African, but we hold no special brief. Then the next question was the SARS collection. If you recall, the number that SARS said it's undisputed but outstanding for collection, they didn't stop there. They went further and said they need an investment in their capacity to strengthen their ability to collect using systems and all those. Last year in the budget, they were given an amount, was it 4 billion or 5 billion? I can't remember the exact amount, to invest in that in their efficiencies, in building their capacity to collect. So as we improve the collection rate, SARS will continue to receive funding to make sure that they can invest in their advance their capacity to collect, so that we could reach higher milestones. You will recall when I was reading the cabinet statement, this milestone was achieved in the shortest period of time to get here, because SARS has also invested in their capacity, but we have also implemented the recommendations from the New Jet Commission, but it's also a symbol of a growing economy. So as our economy grows, SARS will also collect more, but also we want to increase their capacity and ability to collect that which is undisputed. All the appointments that were made by cabinet were announced in the cabinet statements. There are no additional appointments. If there are new appointments, they will be announced in the next cabinet statement. And the appointment of the commissioner of SARS is not a cabinet matter. It's a matter between the president and the Minister of Finance. And just to close, the SARS commissioner, the president said he will make an announcement soon. And that's above my pay grade, and it's above cabinet's pay grade. You'll recall the appointment of the SARS commissioner is the sole responsibility of the president. On attempts by the US to undermine South Africa, there's nothing new there, but we remain a very strategic partner of the US. We are unavoidable to each other. We cannot wish each other away. We must coexist, and that's why we continue to engage with the US as a valued partner. The disinvitation by France to the G7, and admittedly under the pressure of the US, because it's public information. You should recall that South Africa is not a member of the G7. So actually it saves our president time for going there to observe members of the G7 speaking and taking decisions, and sometimes they will even allow non-members to speak, but if the time runs out, non-members are not even allowed to speak. But even when you speak, it doesn't change the price of bread, because you are not a member. You don't contribute to decision making. But in terms of our relationship with France, we remain solid. Part of the companies that pledged in this investment conference, that investment conference that we've had, is a French company, to indicate our solid relationship. And you know that of recent, France have been putting pressure on the US about the participation of South Africa in the G20 under the US leadership. We have said it doesn't change the price of bread. We are continuing with the implementation of our G20 agenda, and whoever will take over after the US who has committed to continue supporting the South African G20 presidency agenda. On the task team, so we said, maybe let me explain it this way. And the announcement we made, we said the panic buying and the holding is creating logistics problems for supply. but we've got the adequate supply for the immediate. So depending on how South Africans behave, that will determine the extent to which we've got the supply. And we've also clarified that in terms of our reliance, our crude oil is not coming from the Middle East. It's only the refined products. Our crude oil is coming from Angola and Nigeria. It's only the refined products. And you must recall that we've got a refining capacity ourselves as a country. It's just that we have not, when they shut down, we have not moved fast to restore that capacity. So part of the consideration is that on the medium to long-term measure is to rebuild our refining capacity, because if you check, the semblance of refining capacity is in South Africa and Ali Dangote in Nigeria. That is not safe for a continent to be reliant on other continents. And therefore, it is our responsibility as the leading economy in the continent to develop reliable refining capacity, not only for ourselves, but that could also supply the region and the continent. It's part of those things that we are considering. We are also considering the impact on the cost of living. There are other issues that are related. The technical team is working on what does it mean for with the fuel increases, because they are going to be there. What does it mean when the electricity increases and the tariff increases are taking place? What does it mean for food security? What does it mean to have fertilizer shortages for our ability to have food security? So it's a range of measures we are considering to say what then becomes the interventions. And those interventions will be structured in a manner of a short-term, medium, and long-term interventions. Because our understanding is that with the impact of the war on the refineries, you know that major refineries in the Middle East, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Iran itself, and also in the UAE, they've been demolished. The rebuild period is going to be longer. Even if the war stops today, they will need a lead time to rebuild. So what does it mean? We are considering all those options, and when we have made the determination, we will announce what are those interventions. With the intervention on the fuel levy had to be done immediately because the fuel increases were taking effect just yesterday. So we needed to make sure that that is done. But we are aligning our work to make sure that we make recommendations to Cabinet and the President, and the right decisions are taken to protect the interests of South Africa, but also, you recall, we are a chairperson of SADC, but also to mitigate the major role player in the AU, being the champion for infrastructure development, to also say what is the position that we can advance in the AU. We want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the responses. May I check if we have any follow-up questions before I go to the questions online? I see some hands. Is it a follow-up?
No, my question on SAPS, Directed Police Service, not SAPS.
The South African Police Service.
Yeah, and that task.
And the task.
I responded to the question. I indicated that the President has said he'll make an announcement on as it relates to the SAPS Commissioner.
Oh, I thought you said SARS.
No, SAPS Commissioner. No, the President did not make an announcement on the SAPS Commissioner. It was the Minister of Finance who indicated the announcement will be made soon. The President spoke about the SAPS Commissioner.
Thank you very much for the clarity. Last hand, follow-up questions. You're right. You're fine. I saw your hand up earlier. Fresh questions. Okay, now let's take follow-ups first.
Oh, I'm not too sure if the Minister has responded to Zianda's question. Sorry. When she asked about mitigation efforts, particularly for those households that are reliant on paraffin, I might have missed it. But if she hasn't, we would also appreciate that. But an additional question is, on the allegations that were made against the Minister of Sports and Culture, what is Cabinet's position? Because they are serious. Allegations by an inmate who is claiming that the minister is having some ties with the drug lords and all.
So that's a new question, right?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Maybe let me take another question.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Khawelo Maoleo from UFM. I've got a couple of them. Minister,
Short
this
and-
condemnation of the so-called installation of a Nigerian king in Eastern Cape, don't you think it's perhaps a little bit too little too late, considering that March and March Actions SA and others had already ransacked the town, and I saw some of the things that were banned don't necessarily belong to Nigerians, your taxes and so on. I'm not sure whether calm has been completely restored in that area. Don't you think the government could have reacted much earlier and avert the violence that we have seen? And this principle of first country of safety regarding asylum seekers, kindly for the benefit of the nation, try and explain it in the simplest terms possible as to what does it mean for South Africans. And still on that, is the government of the opinion that Nigerians are particularly problematic as a demographic, as a group of immigrants in this country? Just clarity on that. And regarding the fuel, how is the government making sure that you know, greedy business people don't have a field day just hiking prices, you know, taking advantage of the crisis that we are in? How do you make sure that the increments are within a legal limit? And because we have already seen garages that don't have at all. What is your assessment of the situation as government? How long can the country go in the event that the conflict does not stop in the foreseeable future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any hand. Oh, there is a last one before I go online.
Thanks, Brawley. Just a quick one for the minister on perhaps whether or not there was an update, at least from the Minister of Justice, in relation to the Concourts justices the President hasn't appointed since October. Is that a concern?
Thank you very much. Maybe let's afford the minister before we go online. Minister.
Thank you. I responded to the question that was raised about what are the measures that the committee is considering. I can't say this is the measure. I indicated the scope at which what we are considering. If you want me to repeat, I can repeat. We are looking at measures to increase our refining capacity, not only for ourselves, but for the region and for the continent. We are looking at the impact on food security. We are looking at the impact on the cost of living in general. I even gave an example that if whatever relief we put, what does it mean when the electricity prices are hiking? What does it mean when the municipal rates and taxes are hiking in terms of impacting the cost of living? Those are the discussions we are having. The technical team is working, or they are working on those matters, because it's not only fuel that is in short supply, it's also fertilizers. I thought I'd clarified that part in detail. Every day in South Africa, somebody makes an allegation. And they said, if you make an allegation, you have a responsibility to open a criminal case against, so that those allegations can be investigated and tested in court if they are found there's basis, and tested in court and the court adjudicates. But the tendency of wanting to treat political leaders differently from South Africans is not fair. Because tomorrow, Muluko, you'll wake up and make an allegation against Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. And then we must all lynch Khumbudzo for allegations that have not been tested by anyone. So there must be a criminal case that gets opened, and necessary investigations take place, And when the police have found the evidence, then there will be a criminal charges, and the matter will go to court. It's only fair. I know that ministers or public representatives have a higher pedestal to respond to, but we need to also follow the provision of our laws, because everyone has rights. Because you are saying somebody make an allegation, but you are not emphasizing that the minister has disputed those allegations. So let's get those who are alleging to open the case, so that the case can be investigated and the necessary course of justice the necessary course of law takes place. On the Concord justices, it's not a matter of cabinet. I think that follow-up must be made with Minister Kubai. It's a specific matter. There's a minister responsible on that matter. On the condemnation, is not a little bit too late? It's not, because the condemnation did not start today. The condemnation started immediately. The intelligence structures picked up that attempt to so-called coronate a chief, and the DECO started to interact with the Nigerian High Commission. They provided their explanation. It's for that reason that the cabinet noted the apology, and that DECO must continue to engage with the Nigerian High Commission on the unbecoming conduct of Nigerians who are visitors in our country. And government communication on this matter is not starting now. The Deputy Minister of Traditional Affairs, Reverend Bans Ngamashe, was on the ground interacting on this matter long before the march. And even on the day of the march, he was there interacting in the Eastern Cape with the relevant people. If you recall, remember there were fake news that the King Dalindlebo has endorsed the so-called coronation. It was the Deputy Minister who was there to make sure that the Abatembu royal family clarifies the position, which they later clarified. It's just that now we are dealing with a post-cabinet briefing after the matter. Cabinet has no view about Nigerians. If they are when they are in the country legally, they are welcome to be in the country legally. When they conduct themselves in a manner that is unbecoming, we'll take it up either through law enforcement, but also when we think it's a community issue, we'll take it up with the High Commission. And you know there are processes that are followed when you deal with High Commissioners or embassies of countries, because you are dealing with the government of that country in our jurisdiction. And let's be given space to deal with the High Commission through DECO. And we must reiterate, our relationship with the Nigerian government is very solid. It's fraternal, it's solid, and we work together and complement and support each other. The Nigerian government will not stand aside and have their citizens undermine the authority of the state in South Africa. We are confident of that. And the behavior of a few should not lead to the generalization of a conduct of many. Outside that grouping of Nigerians, there are many Nigerians who are contributing meaningfully to the economy of this country. As much as there are others who are contributing to the destruction of this country. But that is the act that law enforcement must follow up and deal with decisively and effectively. You requested a clarification on the hiking of petrol prices that is within the regulatory framework. There is a regulator in place who you can report the illegal hiking of fuel prices to. The fuel prices are a regulated industry in South Africa, so the fuel service stations cannot just wake up tomorrow and decide, oh, now petrol is no longer the liter of petrol. What is the liter of petrol now? I've not poured. I'd poured 3 weeks back. My So you can't wake up and say the liter of petrol is 50 rands. That's why, to make sure South Africans are protected, that's why every time there's a fuel increase, it's announced to say the fuel will increase by this much to become this much per liter. Whether it's petrol, diesel, and even the petrol and diesel, they go into grades, the LP23 and LP25 diesel, the 50 and the 500 milligrades. It's explained so that you know, and you are not, nobody can scam you. Those fuel stations that have been scamming people and increasing fuel, and we are aware that there are fuel stations that increased that high prices last week. We are going to publicize a number and the contact information which the complaints can then be directed to, so that we can have follow-up. And we please request proof from yourselves that they were charging you outside of what is the regulated price that was set by government. We must remind South Africans, this is not the first fuel increase. Fuel increases happen continuously in the year. It's not because fuel increases are not happening because of the war. There will be fuel increases that increase because of this or that. Sometimes we've had fuel decreases. Actually, the bulk of last year we've had serious decreases in the petrol price, whereas in 2024 there was a serious hike, continuous hike of fuel prices, and there was no war. We need to remember that, so don't panic and say this is the issue. It is the panic buying, wherein people are even going with containers to buy fuel or with and to hold fuel. That is costing the dry stations. If you remember, we are supplied from particular refineries and particular depots that services all the stations. So if you go and buy, when the fuel station knows that the supply they get once a month, once a week, it lasts them 7 days, and now you go and buy and decrease that fuel availability to 3 days, there is going to be logistical constraints, because the trucks must still move from a depot, and there are provinces that do not have depots close by. Their depots are far away. You find that they still drive to bring the fuel there. So you're going to have that dry station situation. But that's why when you go to a fuel station, they will tell you, we've run out of this, but the supply will come tomorrow, or the supply will reach us a day after, because of the distance where the refueling is done for truckers to send the trucks in. So the dry stations, we are causing, as South Africans, the dry stations by panic buying. So please, let's be patient. We'll make sure that you've got fuel at all material times. You have requested an explanation of the first country of safety principle. The first country of safety principle is guided by the UN, and that says in situations of conflict, people are allowed to move from their countries and go to the next country where there's no conflict and be given refugee status and be protected. Even if they come with no proof of identification, you need to register them and accommodate them and give them some level of recognition. Why? Because sometimes they'll run away when there's under attack and there's nothing they can take. They only take the clothes on their back, and that's important. And if you look with South Africa's geographical location, we do not have a situation of conflict in the countries adjacent to us. There's no war in Botswana. There's no war in Lesotho. There's no war in Zimbabwe. There's no war in Namibia. There's no war in Mozambique. Even if you go slightly further, there's no war in Zambia. There's no war in Malawi. So therefore, it will mean the people who are leaving the South Sudan, not even South Sudan, who are leaving the Sudan, must settle in the next country of safety, which will be Sudan, South Sudan, and also, Somalia? They must settle in that area. And Uganda, the regions that are within closest to them. So we don't have what we call political refugees or refugees. So the white paper is aimed at making sure that we then regulate that arrangement of who gets admitted as a refugee here. And in exceptional circumstances, we have admitted economic refugees. You'll remember when Zimbabwe had an economic meltdown and when the period of droughts, extended drought periods. We have admitted people as economic refugees when the time we introduced the Zimbabwean special permit. We admitted them because it's inhumane to sit in your country and allow your neighbors to die when you can assist. But the question that we have is that, does the economic situation still warrant economic migrants in the country? So the white paper deals with those issues. I don't want to say who doesn't qualify to be here because of that definition, because you then say Minister Ntshavheni is mobilizing against this grouping, that grouping, and then I'll be accused of xenophobia. But the white paper also defines what is the first a country of safety. And we urge, it will be available in the Home Affairs and Government website. We urge South Africans to go and familiarize themselves in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the clarification. That was quite educative, and we hope it will go a long way towards also assisting South Africans on that. Let me invite then the online questions. Not sure, Vomkwe.
The first question is from Spelele Bulldozer representing Business Report. It's related to the fuel hikes, and I understand through the responses that the minister has already made to some of the questions and the statement also. This the justice has already been done to the question, but I will just present it for the record. The question is Cabinet satisfied with the current volume of strategic fuel stock that is in reserve? And if not, what are the measures being explored to shore up SA strategic fuel reserves in case of a spike in demand and intensified supply chain disruption? And we have a question from Paul Bloomberg. Will the proposed amendments to the Electronic Communications Act reduce BEE requirements of the ICT sector? And if so, how? And we have Basadin at FM News. Two questions. The first one, some in the Western Cape have said that the social issues lead people to join gangs and commit crimes. In addition to deploying the military, is Cabinet planning on dealing with issues in these communities such as unemployment, school dropouts, lack of recreation, amongst other issues? And the second question from Basadin is, if the Iran-US-Israel war continues, could we expect another fuel price increase? The last question from Susan representing Amapungane, saying, Minister, during the last cabinet briefing, I asked you about the sudden departure of the Petro SA CEO and why Cabinet had not discussed the matter. And your response was that it was not within Cabinet's purview to discuss CEOs of state-owned entities. And I found 18 instances where the appointments of CEO of SOEs were discussed by the Cabinet in 2025. You also referred me to the new state-owned entities bill. I have checked, and Petro SA is not one of the entities covered by this bill. And I note that once again, Cabinet has failed to discuss the departure of Petro SA's CEO. My understanding is the Strategic Fuel Fund also has a new acting CEO. Are some state-owned entities considered off limits for Cabinet? And if not, why is Cabinet silent on these important leadership changes? Thank you.
We will request that also at the end of your responses, you can round up the press briefing. Thank you very much.
Okay. The question on whether we are satisfied with the strategic fuel stock. The statement indicated that the country remains supply adequate. And whether if the war becomes protracted, there's going to be other fuel price increases. I do not know. And as I've indicated earlier, fuel price increases have been there for a number of reasons. So let's not, as the media, create a panic environment where people say, if the war is not ending, then we must go and hold fuel. On the ECA Act, we'll invite Minister Malatsi to come and brief in detail sometime next week. On whether the strategic, in fact, on whether we're considering refining any of our strategic fuel stock. We will announce that decision if the task team charged with looking at mitigating the situation makes that recommendation. As of now, for the medium term, we are looking at rebuilding our refining capacity of the country, as I've earlier indicated. There was an important question raised about the social issues that impact the crime or gang situation in the Western Cape. It is correct that the social conditions in most of our townships in the Western Cape leads to the gang violence and the gang situation in the Western Cape. It is for that reason that we have indicated that the building of the wall will not resolve the crime situation in the Western Cape. And also when the president announced the deployment of the SNDF to support SAPS in the fight against gangsterism, he said it's not a silver bullet. Currently, we are doing force multiplier and firepower support. But what is critical is the interventions that must be made to make sure that the people of the Western Cape have proper housing and we reduce informal settlement. The City of Cape Town has a budget for building human settlements. It has that mandate. It must provide settlements and housing for the people who are some crowded, some stay in informal settlements, some in backyards, but some are overcrowded. But secondly, the proliferation of drugs and the breakdown of family structure is a result of lack of opportunities, economic opportunities for the affected communities. And it's for that reason that we say all provinces must work with national government to make sure there are equal opportunities to jobs, but also equal opportunity to schools. If you recall, in 2024 and 2023, the communities of Western Cape were protesting against the closure of public schools nearer to them. So if children cannot be able to go to school because their parents cannot afford transport to take them to school, the implication is that we are going to have a crisis. And therefore, what are the initiatives that are being done to make sure that we create employment? But not only employment, but also create opportunities for people to participate in small businesses. In the cabinet statements, we have announced interventions on measures that are aimed to supporting small businesses. If you recall, during my tenure when I was the Minister of Small Business, we made a waiver of business licensing fees. And in that waiver, we indicated that the city of Cape Town, across all municipalities, charge the highest license fees to register even as a vendor or a street vendor or a street hawker, and just to operate a spaza shop, and it becomes unaffordable to South Africans. So those interventions must be made. As national government, are we sitting and watching and closing our eyes to the situation in the Western Cape? No. That's why there are policies. The Minister of Small Business Development has announced measures through this cabinet meeting and previous cabinet decisions, and also on her own, of supporting small businesses, and a dedicated approach to support the communities that are not able to access those services. So the social interventions, as you indicate, and as the communities raise it, are very imperative to deal with crime. And we're not saying the poor social conditions are a justification for people to participate in crime and commit crime. No. I thought or maybe on that part of the social interventions, there is a summit, the Local Economic Development Summit that is being hosted by the Department of Small Business Development and SALGA from the 15th to the 16th of April, which is going to concentrate on how do we make local economic development and local participation and small business development and small business participation by South Africans is going to make sure that it benefits our people to deal with the social ills. When we are announcing the decision on the white paper on immigration, we also indicated the white paper now makes provision for relevant departments to designate employment, professions, trade that must be restricted for South Africans, taking into account the responsibility we have to asylum seekers and refugees in the country. And do not worry about refugees and asylum seekers. We've got, Home Affairs has solid databases, so they can be verified. If you recall, when Seri took us to court in the city of Johannesburg, we won because we said people must come and register, they must have papers. And because the city of Johannesburg was going to be able to verify the application status, the standing status of people who are claiming to be refugees or to be in the country legally through the Home Affairs systems. That's why the continuous building of Home Affairs into a reliable system with database, it's important for the security, but also to protect the interests of South Africans. Again, on the issues of CEOs, Cabinet discusses appointments of CEOs on the submission of ministers, responsible ministers, to say we want to appoint X or there's a challenge here on X. All the appointments come through a submission. So this is how cabinet work. We don't wake up and go there like a stock fell and say, hey, Khumbudzo, how do you feel? What's happening in your environment? No. There's an agenda set, and there are memorandums that are prepared, discussion documents that are prepared and circulated 7 days before the meeting to say we are going to discuss this and that and this. And the different departments are the ones, through their ministers, who make those submissions. Those submissions do not come directly to cabinet unless on special occasions. Those submissions go to cabinet committees. And even in cabinet committees, they start in the clusters. And the cabinet clusters, ministerial clusters, look at what is constraining the cluster or the various departments in the cluster. And then say to the relevant department, we want a memorandum to discuss this impact. So cabinet does not wake up and say, we want to discuss how Khumbudzo is appointing the DG of GCIS. Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, as the minister who is responsible for GCIS, will have to make a cabinet submission. And in the occasion of the DGs, we go through the Department of Public Service and Administration. DGs and DDGs, they are appointed through the Department of Public Service and Administration. The CEOs, for instance, if we have to appoint the CEO of Brand SA, then Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, as the minister responsible for Brand SA, will then put up a cabinet submission to cabinet and say, I want to appoint a CEO of Brand SA, and we have interviewed, this is the process we followed, these are the people who applied. So those are the appointments. If there are matters that are constraining the relevant department and minister, then we'll make a submission to cabinet. When there are matters affecting the country and they are not discussed, the relevant department is not discussing those, we then raise through Cabinet Secretariat an issue to say there's this matter of concern which must be brought to Cabinet. Prepare a submission. So the questions you are asking regarding the exits of CEO of Petro SA and this and that, please direct them to the Minister and the Department of Mineral Resources, Mineral and Petroleum Resources. Because this is the stature of our cabinet. This is the nature of how cabinet works. If you have suspicions that there's something that is untoward, you know there are bodies you can report to, so that the matter or the concerns you are raising can then be followed up. But the issues you are raising is relating to the Petro SA and the other entities have not been submitted to cabinet by the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. If you want to say why, please ask the Minister and the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, why are these matters not being brought to the attention of cabinet? As I think I've responded to all the questions that were online. Okay. As we close this briefing, we do so standing on the shoulders of the giants that walked before us, more in particular for us as women. Today, in the history of South Africa, the 2nd of April, it's important as we mark the passing away of the mother of our nation, Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela, who fought for the freedom of South Africans, who fought for the rights of women, who marched with the women of 1956. She is and she was a pathfinder in the struggle for women empowerment, who refused to be silenced and carried the torch when her husband was arrested, when she was just a young wife, and who refused to be defined by the identity of her husband, but stood as a leader in her own right. So as we deliver this cabinet statement on the 2nd of April, we remember Mama Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela, and we say to her spirit, Mama, you have multiplied. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let me not dilute all the good stuff that you have delivered. Safe to say your closing statement of saying we have multiplied. I think I can assist those who want that picture of that multiplication. I have it. Thank you very much. Let me thank also Fortune and Andiswa for the good work that they did for interpreting. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of this post-cabinet briefing agenda. As the minister have said, let's be careful on the roads, but let's go and have and observe this Easter. Thank you very much.